And a very good day. Welcome to another edition of Catchin' Carp Outdoors, our podcast honoring Minnesota's great outdoors. And today we're going to talk a little kind of like a hodgepodge of different things, as we're going to go to the DNR and talk with a few topics as we bring in Scott Mockentune of the Hutchinson Area Fisheries Office of the DNR today. And welcome back to the program here as we welcome back here on the radio and on the podcast Scott Mockentune of the Minnesota DNR with the Fisheries Office in Hutchinson. Good day to you, Scott.
Hey, Joel. How are you doing?
Doing very well, and boy, you're kind of like me. The best part about our jobs is talking about fishing, and that's kind of where you go. But as you head into wintertime here, this is, I guess, probably for you, it's maybe a little bit slower. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up. I know we just wrapped up our staff meeting here earlier, and as we do every week, and kind of talked about, boy, after you get to the backside of deer season, it's sort of a shift. Everybody loves the field season and is excited to go out and sample fish, stock fish, assess fish, all the fun stuff that you associate with the work that we do for anglers. And now it's the data part. You go and write up your reports and you repair your equipment, you patch nets, and you look underneath and squint your eyes in a microscope or in a microfiche reader looking at scales and hard part structures like otoliths, these bones that we take out of the heads of fish, and we try to figure out how old they are, and then we can assess when, if they were from years that we stocked, and what kind of the balance of age and size structure are on lakes. And a lot of the monitoring, kind of the little things we do behind the scenes really happen now in the off season.
But we're going to talk a lot about the fishing, but maybe we'll just very briefly talk on a couple other DNR topics here. And first, as you mentioned, once again, on the backside of deer hunting, which I know there's a little bit, I don't know exactly which season it is, but there's a little bit of deer hunting going on, but we're on the backside of most of it. So how did the deer hunt go in the area? What have you been hearing from some of your fellow DNR people there?
I heard it went pretty well. The firearms portion just closed up. There's folks still taking the bow out, and we'll continue to do so through the end of the year. We'll have muzzleloader hunting the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And then there's bee season for folks, firearms bee season that comes up for folks in certain deer permit areas around the state, particularly the southeast. It went pretty well. I think this was the first year that we didn't have chronic wasting disease surveillance going on. There were 3 years without a positive wild test, so that I think was a positive note, not having to collect samples. But other parts of the state, they are doing that with contactless kind of collection, and then folks always do have the option to send in a sample. I know, speaking for myself personally, a couple of years ago on a Wisconsin hunt. That's what I elected to do, is be able to pull some lymph nodes, put them in a alcohol solution, and send them into the University of Minnesota Diagnostics Lab to get a test. And actually had to have a test on a mule deer that I shot in Montana last year. So it's a skill that you think about what you need to do as a hunter and an angler, and that sort of evolves over time. Reading the regulations and the things you need to do, and that might be a skill that people have to pick up along the way, is learning to sample your own lymph nodes and send those in for testing.
Sure. Same kind of question for small game, because I know we're on the backside of a lot of that, but there's still some of that small game, some bird stuff going on. How have you been hearing about those?
It's kind of funny how our weather's been real touch and go. It's been cold one week and hot the next, and kind of oscillating back and forth. But a couple of weeks after the pheasant season opened up, we kind of made the switch to winter weather, and then it warmed up a little bit. So sometimes that nasty weather, the birds can handle it okay, but the hunters maybe not so much. So I'm kind of curious to see if that kept some of the folks away, because I know that roadside counts and bag reports coming back were on the upside, and I think folks were pleased with those results. And as a result, if people didn't get out when the snow started to fly, there may be a few more birds in the field for folks that are willing to put the boots on and get after them now as we're settling into the late part of the season. And then for other small game hunting, um, there's still opportunities on fur bears. You can go hunt rabbits. You could go hunt raccoons. You can do that right through the end of the year. You can head to parts of the state that have rough grouse or sharp tails and hunt those. So yeah, there's still some opportunities.
Well, now let's shift and we'll talk about some fishing things, which you know more a little bit about for the fisheries here in Hutchinson. And I would guess this time, in middle to end of November, it's too late for open water. I suppose you could take a boat on if you wanted to. It's be darn cold though, and I don't know if you'd want to take a boat. And it's too early for ice fishing yet here, so it's kind of that in between season for everybody.
It is. If you're one of those really hardy souls, though, it can be absolutely dynamite fishing, especially on the Minnesota River. It's one of those activities I'll partake once deer season is behind me. If I have friends that are willing to go out, and you basically dress up like you're going into a snowstorm. You put on multiple layers and parkas and bibs, but it can be really good walleye and sauger fishing. You can head up to the St. Croix River and fish for sturgeon, and it can be pretty darn good if you can manage to put up with the cold, or if you have to pick your days when it's sunny and the wind isn't howling out there. But boy, can the fishing be good. But it's funny, there'll be folks going out and doing that right up until they're having to break skim ice, and then it's kind of got to put a pause on it, wait for enough safe ice to get out. So you're exactly right. We're kind of in between seasons, but for the folks that can tolerate it, it can be good fishing.
Now, for the upcoming ice fishing season, first, obviously, A, be safe about the ice, make sure there's enough thickness there, but B, once folks can get on the ice, is there anything new as far as laws or procedures or anything different this year that folks should be aware of?
From the law side, there's nothing that's coming to mind that I can think of. Just like you said, it's to preach the safety side of things. You'll see that coming out in news releases. That's always this time of year around Thanksgiving, a little bit thereafter, we start to see skim ice, and there's always that reminder that there's no such thing as safe ice, and that's repeated constantly by our organization, by the Department of Natural Resources. But we just ask folks to be mindful and be careful out there. Take safety equipment along, measure as you go, and really wait till you get a good solid 4 inches before you head out on the ice.
And usually the best place to figure out is it thick enough? Sometimes via bait shops or your DNR place. You talk to local folks. Talk to local folks, I guess, probably is the biggest thing. That is the ice good enough where you are at?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of a balance. You can do a little bit of your homework, like you suggest, by talking to local bait shops. I know our office doesn't keep records of ice thickness or checks like that, but local bait shops will sometimes have it. I know there's an ice app that folks will voluntarily report and will pop up. Usually, a lot of folks start chiming in on that, but ultimately, it's kind of on your own. If you're going to head out there, grab a spud bar. Grab a measuring tape and literally cautiously work your way out and see how much ice you have, and just be safe.
And as we head into the winter season here, I know there's always planning for the next year, and I would guess if you take a rewind to back 12 months, if you and I were talking 12 months. Boy, I don't think any of us would have picked how these last 12 months have gone. Maybe just recap that, because this will be the last time you and I probably chat here in the year of 2020. So recap 2020 from the DNR standpoint. It's been a weird year.
Yeah, I think everybody has to kind of remind themselves, myself included, that no one's life experiences were the same this year, and that extends for us as well. Again, just within Department of Natural Resources and my little perch in fisheries, yeah, we kind of had everything coming down. I remember leaving to go on a family vacation in the middle of March and coming back to a changed world. Run in, get your computer. You're working from home now, and that's been extended quite a bit. So folks are really only going into the office to do field work. We did not take eggs, which was a big deal for the state of Minnesota. We lead the nation by far in walleye production, and we have hatcheries all around the state. So there was no no walleye that were produced in Minnesota. And I don't have the records in front of me, but I bet you got to go back 70, 80, maybe even longer years before there's been a year that the state of Minnesota didn't produce walleye in the hatchery capacity. So our hatcheries really impacted our field work. We were kind of waiting to develop some sort of mitigating guidelines for that, and that was developed kind of as we were entering the summer. And really, as a result, we did gill netting, which we do. We've got experimental gill netting, kind of helps us see what's going on in the lakes that we're monitoring, how our management is working. And normally we also use these trap nets, which are kind of a nearshore framed net. And rather than use those, we'd have to have people within 6 feet of each other. We opted to just do the gill nets where people can deploy those and pick them up, all by themselves. One person on the front of the boat, one person on the back of the boat, and they don't have to get within close to each other. So as well as all the other rules that everyone else is following about contact tracing and wearing masks and keeping our distance. But again, probably the biggest change is the working from home and really having to be careful about how we plan our work and limiting the contact that we have with each other and the public.
Well,
to that, and I'll just say quickly, Joel, just the last thing I'll tack on there is I do want to note that folks can still reach us, email, telephone. We will get back to folks because we get all that information sent directly to us on these email accounts at home.
Well, and to me, it's an interesting thing because when I think, when I think a DNR officer or a conservation officer, it doesn't scream work at home like maybe a financial guy or an insurance guy. To be a DNR guy, you got to be out there and do things. So how much of your job can you do at home and be socially distanced from everybody?
Great question. And you're exactly right. There's that idea of wanting to spend time in the field, and that certainly is what I'll call sexy part of the job, right? What most of us wanted to do when we got into it. In my role as a supervisor, it's more desk work, so it's a little easier to apply it to working from home. But for the rest of the staff, it's been some of those folks we've pivoted to doing things that we had always put on the back burner, really trying to do analysis and write-ups on surveys that we did in the past that maybe we didn't have the time to go back and look at them as closely or to compare or even to scan in historical documents. That change from paper to electronic files that happened probably in the last 15 to 20 years. There was always lingering work to be done with making that digital transformation. So all those things we had on the back burner, and I will readily admit a lot of those were low priority issues. Well, as you're told, you can only do certain things. Those lower priority types of work were the things that we were doing. So yeah, for some of the field staff, their summer kind of went on as it normally would. They were able to come in, pick up the boat on a Monday, go out, set nets, lift those, and fill most of their hours of the week with field work. But for a few of us, it's been more behind the scenes work than we normally would have and less field work.
And I know, one of those jobs that you usually like to get out and see people for are meetings, when you have different rule changes or different this and that, and you get people together. And I know you got one of those coming up here, but it's not going to be in person kind of a meeting, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's been another real kind of a shock, I guess you could say. I never thought I'd see the day we'd be doing these things online. I remember right out of the gate, the state of California had a meeting that they went to online, and it was something of a disaster. They weren't real sure how to use the equipment and had kind of people talking over each other. I'm sure everyone experienced that a little bit with Zoom or GoToMeeting or Microsoft Teams or Skype or whatever people were using, if they hadn't had a lot of experience with it. And we went through some of that too. We actually had our own growing pains of using some of these softwares. But I think one of the challenges is the state of Minnesota, for some actions that we take as natural resource managers, we are required by rule or by statute to have public meetings. And some of these, with rules about not being able to meet or limits on capacity, we had to question, we had to talk to the attorney general or talk to lawyers about are we meeting our statutory requirements of public meetings? And by doing these electronically, in some cases, yes, you can do it that way. In other cases, you're going to have to delay and wait to do a public meeting until you can do it safely in person. And the upcoming meeting is tomorrow night, Tuesday night, the 17th. We are having a public informational meeting to discuss aeration and the history of the fishery at Round Lake. The Round Lake Association has put in a request for aeration. So we originally were scheduled a couple weeks ago, and talking about those technical difficulties, the link that we were using became corrupted at some point before the meeting started. So we actually had to delay it 2 weeks, reissue the news release, and now we are having it tomorrow night.
And if folks, I'm sure not everybody can probably make it there, is there a way for folks that if they do miss it on Tuesday night, can they go back and still comment or get information? How does that work?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There is a link that is within the news release. We'll make that available. Certainly, KDUZ will have that. We'll make sure that you guys have that. And if folks aren't able to participate in the virtual meeting, we will accept comments. You can send them to hutchinson.fisheries@state.mn.us.
Hey, sounds good. We got just a couple of minutes left here. Any final comments here on what you're looking forward for 2021, or what's coming up on the docket that folks should know?
I'm gonna. On the one side of things, certainly the state budgets do impact us. I'll be curious to see what happens. I know we're sort of in our own world with a fish and game fund that is paid by folks that buy fishing and hunting licenses. So we did see a big boom initially in 2020 on people getting outdoors, which is wonderful. We love to see people recreating and enjoying the outdoors. So that's been a good thing for the Fish and Game Fund and the health of that. The money that's there, but I'll be curious to see what's going to happen with our budgeting moving forward. I'm optimistic that things are going to get a little bit better. I know we've learned a little bit from doing this mitigation for field work, and I'm a little more confident that the timing couldn't have been worse for our egg take last spring, because everything was happening right out of the gate when we should have been taking those eggs. And so this year, I think there'll be a little more mitigation and planning, personal protective equipment. I think we'll be able to get some eggs taken and get our hatcheries rolling again in 2021. So you can color me optimistic on that side of things. I'm hoping that we'll see some returns to normalcy, but we're going to continue to serve the public in the best capacity that we can.
Sounds good. Hey, Scott, thanks for coming on the program, and we'll chat again sometime.
All right. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Scott Mockington, Hutchinson Area Fisheries Office of the DNR, here on the program today. And thank you again to Scott for coming on the program here today. You can find out more details if you're interested. We just talked about that Round Lake program. If you're interested more in that, because chances are it's after the meeting when you're listening to this podcast, go to our website, kduz.com, karpradio.com. And you can search for that Round Lake story and get the link and get all the information that you need there about that. Hey, join us next time right here on Catchin' Carp Outdoors. Don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors. And always keep that line in the water. We'll see you next time.
Catchin' Carp Outdoors has been a presentation of KDUZ, KARP, KGLB Radio, and the Ingstad, Minnesota Radio Network. Check out all our past episodes on YouTube.